Just like today, gaining access to sensitive and restricted areas within NASA and their contractor facilities during the heyday of the space race required authorized permission and credentialing. Within my collection of space program related artifacts, I have a number of vintage permits, access badges, and special IDs that granted access to launches, rollout ceremonies, viewing areas, and even the firing rooms, launch pads, and the launch umbilical towers. In this episode, we'll highlight one of my favorite badge type artifacts, and I'll tell you a little bit about its story and why I think it's so cool. Are you ready? Here we go. Hello collectors and space fans, I'm Jim Frangione and welcome back to another installment of Takin Up Space, the place where space history lives and where every artifact tells a story. If you're as passionate as I am about the history of spaceflight and collecting vintage artifacts and space-age memorabilia, be sure to click on the subscribe button and notification bell down below so that you don't miss out on a single episode. As I mentioned in the opening sequence, within my collection I have a fair number of badges, IDs, and permits from the pioneering days of spaceflight dating back to the 1960s and 70s. Their designs range anywhere from simple and utilitarian to some with interesting artwork on them to mark occasions like the rollout of a moon-bound spacecraft from the vehicle assembly building or the launch of a crewed mission. Interestingly, or maybe not so interestingly at all, the vast majority of these badges, permits, and credentials take the form of a rectangle. Simple enough to make sense, I suppose. But what makes my favorite visitor badge so interesting is not just its function, but its form. This Weber Aircraft Corporation visitor badge is unlike anything else in my collection and stands out as unique among all of the other badges out there. As denoted on the badge, it dates back to Project Gemini, but that the badge takes the form of a Gemini capsule itself is what I find so compellingly cool about this item. Its shape, its coloring, the fonts used, they simply reek of mid-20th century Americana, a time when form was considered every bit as important as function. Take a look at the vintage magazines and look at the level of effort and the art put into some of those advertisements. It was of a style that made the ad agencies of Madison Avenue legendary. So legendary that it could take the form of a backdrop for a massively successful television drama like Mad Men some 50 years later. This badge comes right out of that era. It's totally evocative of a time and place in American history. That the Weber Aircraft Corporation made such a design consideration for something as mundane as a visitor's badge strikes me as ironic, given that the nature of their product was anything but pretty. So just what did the Weber Aircraft Company make that was so important to the Gemini program? Well, they built ejection seats, the kind one would typically find in a fighter aircraft. So why would that be important in Gemini? The Mercury spacecraft that came before Gemini all had launch escape systems that used rocket motors to pull the spacecraft away from a potentially malfunctioning booster. Apollo would utilize this mode of launch escape as well, as do the modern day spacecraft of SpaceX's Crew Dragon and Boeing's CST. For a variety of reasons that include both internal politics and preferences and matters of early technical design specifications that would have the Gemini spacecraft return on land via a deployable Regalo wing instead of a parachute, all factored into this decision. In this case, the crew could bail out on ascent if there was a booster problem and on descent if the Regalo wing, or the parachute for that matter, had failed to deploy. But there were major flaws in this thinking that thankfully never came to pass, given that the Gemini program proved to be so spectacularly successful, not least of which were the normally punishing effects of any ejection, and the little matter of setting off a fiery blast from a compartment that contained a crew soaked in pure oxygen. If used in real life, the outcome of an astronaut's survival was anything but guaranteed. But we did come close to this scenario during the launch of the Gemini 6 mission with Wally Schirra and Tom Stafford aboard in what would be a harrowing launch pad abort.
For takeoff. Roger, adios, minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Gemini 6.
Just 1.2 seconds after ignition, Gemini 6's Titan rocket shuts down. Sensing no motion in the seat of his pants, Commander Wally Schirra makes one of the riskiest bets in the history of spaceflight. He decides not to eject. If he wagered incorrectly and the rocket started to fall on itself, it would be all over for him and Stafford. So how did it turn out?
Okay, we're just sitting here breathing.
Thanks to the steely nerves of Wally Schirra, Gemini 6 and her crew would live to fly another day. They would join Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, who were already in orbit aboard Gemini 7, for the first genuine rendezvous in space, flying in close formation for hours before successfully returning to Earth on December 16, 1965. That's not the end of the story. A Weber ejection seat actually did in fact save the life of another well-known astronaut, just not in space or during a launch. None other than Neil Armstrong himself had his life saved just moments before certain death during a training run of the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, or LLTV, an ungainly flying machine that simulated lunar landing conditions here on Earth. Armstrong jokingly once said that he had the pleasure of flying all the machines in the test program: the LLRF, the LLRV, the LLTV, the lunar module, and even the Weber ejection seat, although that last one was not by choice. Talk about nerves of steel. Typically stoic, Armstrong, very much alive, returned to his office after these events to attend to the day's paperwork. I was alive and there was still work to be done. And there you have it. Absolutely remarkable. As you can see, this badge, while just plain cool to look at, has an incredible story to reveal. As I say, every artifact tells a story here on Takin Up Space. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this particular artifact and learning a little bit about its place in the history of Project Gemini and how a Weber aircraft ejection seat once saved the life of a man who would ultimately become the first human being on the moon. I know I've enjoyed sharing these stories with you. A special shout out to my friend Sam at Milan Jolie Designs for this really cool t-shirt I'm sporting today. I absolutely love it. Thanks a million, Sam. And as always, thank you to you for tuning into this channel. If you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to give it a thumbs up down below, and feel free to let me know your thoughts by dropping me an email at jim.takinupspace@gmail.com. Until next time, collectors and space fans, keep your head held high and keep your eyes on the stars.